Hello everybody, welcome to this video where I'm going to be discussing death. Yes, finally, I think I have never made a video on death and a couple of other ideas. So let me explain the background behind my thinking of death. I think we've all thought of death at times in our lives, just kind of like this unknown entity, right? Like what happens after you die? Is it going to be painful when you die? When are you gonna die? How is your family going to react, things like that, and maybe even thinking about death in terms of like family members and friends and stuff like that. But the reason I think I was thinking about this is because like I wanted to actually, I guess to a certain extent, I think everyone's afraid of death, but I was trying to make myself like, I was trying to rationalize death, right? To not be afraid of it, to not feel afraid. And because at times you kind of think like, well, when people say people die, they usually say they are now resting, right? Because you come to this life basically to move around, to work, and that's exhausting. So then when you die, it's said that you rest, but do you really rest? Like what does that mean? Because resting is really something you do in this life, right? And it's a dichotomy of work, right? You work, you rest, you work, you rest. But if you die and you never work, are you ever resting? So we can get into logical things like that. So that's where it comes from. But I also wanted to discuss before I get into three different scenarios that I can think of at least of what happens when you die. And I'm Catholic, I'm Christian, but I believe you go to heaven when you die. But still, like, let's just do this for the logical exercise. First, why do we fear death? I think we fear death. I think we fear anything, as people say, we fear anything that is unknown to us. So if like some person shows up in some room and we don't know the room and we don't know the person, automatically, I think it's the first response. We're afraid. It's like caution, like what's going on, you know? And that's why also we need to know the reason for things, right? Because then that gives us a sense of control, a sense of knowing, right? We fear the unknown. So death is part of the unknown because we don't know what happens when you die, right? And another thing I wanted to discuss here is why do we value life, right? Like what if we're meant to die when we're born? Like I was thinking about this as I was falling asleep last night. And I was like, why? I mean, I get that life is precious. You have opportunities to do things, to reinvent yourself, to create, to love, to live, to have experiences, to learn things, knowledge. I get that part. But I mean, in the grand scheme of it all, like universally, or, in, as they say, in los tiempos de los tiempos in Spanish, like, is there really a reason why we're supposed to be here, or is that just some human idea that obviously it suits us to value life because then we're able to protect it, right, with human rights and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm just not sure. What if we're not meant to live, right? What if we're just, yeah, because we see when people die, it's like tragedy because they're no longer with us. We will no longer be able to create new memories with those people, right? Their time has come. Um, but then it's like you don't know what's after. What if like what's after is so good and here we're just wasting time, right? Like we don't really know, right? Okay, well, anyway, what happens when you die? I think there are three possibilities, and this is kind of like the rationalization of trying to understand death as to not fear it as much. I think logically, one of these three things is valid, but there can be more things, right? Okay, so first, nothing. The first thing I think could happen is nothing. That means that, I mean, imagine how you were before you were born. That's how you will be after you're born, eternally, right? Like there's no resurrection, there's no heaven, there's no hell. I mean, it's just like, your nervous system operates and your body operates magically, which is also something very wonderful, right? But because we don't have to be hooked or charged to something. How food breaks us, how food breaks down, and we're able to function is also incredible. But basically, the everything you sense, feel, think, everything you do, right, is based within your body. So when you die, when your body stops working, you basically don't think, you don't feel, you don't do anything, right? You just nothingness. Like before you were born, after you're born, you don't have a spirit, you don't have a soul, right? It's just nothingness. So in that case, I mean, it could be scary to think about it, but you also have to remember that you won't feel anything, you won't think anything. So you're just like, it's like you'll be asleep, but eternally, right? So that's the first thing. I mean, it's not very attractive, but it could be something that happens. I mean, like total blackness, I guess, like just nothing forever, right? Which would make this life then something special, right? In that case, right? Okay. So yeah, I put here just like before we were burned, just like before we were born. Okay. Would we rest in this case? That's the question then. I guess so. We wouldn't do anything, but again, we wouldn't feel resting, right? We would just be, it would be like a sleep. So I guess to a certain extent, we would be asleep, we would be resting. So it kind of like, yes. The second possibility is a midway. I want to say a midway because as a Christian Catholic, you probably know where I'm going with this. Eventually, I think the third possibility is heaven, and I'll explain what heaven may look like. But the midway is like not nothing, but also not heaven. What I mean by by midway is some type of weird like dimension, and I think it could be scary if we're alone, right? Like imagine that you die and then you are transported to this other dimension and there's nobody there, right? Like everyone, when everybody dies, like they just get teleported or transported into some other dimension. And then, because we can think of it in a nice way, but then that would even be like maybe imagining heaven, from an anthropological perspective, right? Where we would have people, we would be living happily forever, right? But let's say there's interdimensions and you're somewhere else, not here on earth, but somewhere else with people, right? I guess that would make it better. But let's say you're like alone, that would be scary, traveling through space or some, I don't know, weird thing. And then while you're there, imagine that first of all, you don't know what's going on, so you're probably confused. But then imagine that you're suffering, right? And then let's bring resurrection in, not resurrection, what is it called when you reincarnate, right? Let's bring reincarnation into the mix where you can be born again, so you can leave that dimension and then come back to life, which wouldn't really make life on earth the worst possible option. If, I mean, when you die, you get sent to like this weird thing, where you're suffering, kind of like maybe even saying it's like hell, right? So you get ejected into this other dimension, you're alone, and maybe you're even suffering. It's the suffering is so unbearable that you say, hey, earth or life on earth isn't really that bad of an option. Let me go back there, right? Because I can't stand this suffering or wherever I am, right? So you choose to reincarnate and come back, right? That would be the second one. The third option is heaven. Now, heaven, I imagine that it would be a place where, we imagine it like up in the clouds, but we could say this place is kind of like, there aren't any worries, there's no suffering, there's no pain, there's no anxiety, there's no depression, right? But I also imagine that we would really have to be prepared for it, because imagine if you die and go to heaven and you meet God and you understand the immensity of everything, the greatness of creation, because in that case maybe God would have made life and the universe and earth and everything. You know, just imagine like the feeling, just imagine as humans knowing all of that and understanding it, we would probably like, our heads would explode, right? Like we would be so overwhelmed. We would probably freak out, like genuinely, we would freak out. Maybe people would break into psychosis, or, like it would be shocking, right? To say the least. So imagine if you die and that happens, just right off the bat, uh, you can't call that heaven then, right? You're not happy. So I think some of our systems, or some things that we know of as such as, I mean, I think we would have to change. We would be different, and I guess that's where maybe the idea of a spirit or a soul would come into play, because maybe that's what would just connect to heaven, to God, to everything. And, it would just be like full bliss. So, what I understand as being heaven is a place where you're always basically like in bliss, in happiness, peaceful, and then I asked myself, like, what could you do there? Would it just be like you chilling all day, like if you were always at the beach? But then let's say it's not really like being at the beach, because even then you would get tired of being at the beach for a long time, right? Like, and you're going to be here eternally. So maybe you could, again, we would have to understand it in a different way, because it would really have to be something that you could do forever and you would love it, right? It would be like pure ecstasy, like all the time, right? And then I thought of like, what if you also got the chance to like, learn and expand your knowledge even further, like already knowing everything, excuse me, there is to know, like actually build or develop new theories or stuff like that. I think that would be crazy, right? So those were my three possibilities and three scenarios of death. Now I'm just going to talk about a couple other things. First of all, I was reading something and it said, what's the difference, like some epistemological questions? What would be the difference between chance and cause, right? So I thought that was a very interesting question, because if you really think about it, there's not much of a difference, but they're very different things. Chance is just like what happens, and I guess it comes down to human perception and human expectation, because chance is like this happened and then A happened and then A caused B, right? Like this action caused this action and it was just by chance, right? And then cause is like this happened and this caused this effect, right? So it's in definition, or fundamentally it's the same thing, it's the same idea. The only thing that changes is, like, I think how much in control you were of those actions. Like if something happens by chance, like let's say you're walking down the street and some guy comes up to you and offers you the best job of your life, and you take it and it is, you could say, well, that was just by chance, I was just at the right place at the right time. But nonetheless, A caused B, right? And it's different as if you're like looking for a new job, and maybe you have taken some courses, you have updated your CV, you got a nice haircut, you're looking your best, and you go to this job interview, you did all the work and you get the best job of your life. And you're not going to call that chance, you're going to call that, well, yeah, I did the work, it was cause and effect, right? But again, in essence, it's the same thing, right? But the only thing that changes is how involved you are, right? When you call it chance, I guess you're not as involved as when you call it cause and effect. When you call it cause and effect, it's because you think you caused it, right? It's thanks to you that happened, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. And when it's by chance, if it's, and I'm thinking now, if it's a good thing, you would say, oh, that's good luck, or that was good chance. And if it's a bad thing, that's when you say, like, oh, it is what it is. That's destiny, that's fate. We can't change it. Like, some things are just meant to be or not meant to be, right? But again, in essence, logically speaking, it's the same thing. A causes B, right? So they both talk about connection, right? As in this case, A and B. But cause has an apparent logical relation with human understanding, right? Where A caused B, and then chance apparently doesn't have that relation, because it's just like something random that happened causes something else, and you're like, well, I wasn't expecting that, or I didn't plan that, I had no control over that, right? So I guess it really just breaks down. What I'm trying to say is it breaks down, or it comes down to human perception, because from a God's eye, or from a universe perspective, it's the same thing, right? It's this causes this, whether you had involvement in it or not, doesn't really change the fact that it's still a logical sequence of events, right? Okay, so we'll leave that there. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was interpersonal versus intrapersonal teaching learning processes. So I want to say right off the bat that I think there are certain students and teachers, especially when we talk about careers, there are careers with complex abstract ideas such as law and psychology, and we can, pair those up into the humanities. And those types of students have a certain personality, which is they're more, you could say, individualistic, more hyper motivated. They're social, and we could also say they're emotional, but they're more theoretical, and they like to think about things. They're thinkers ultimately, right? They like theory more than practice. And then on the other hand, what I've noticed is there are other types of students, such as, and I actually did a little article on this on Google Sites if you want to check that out. It's in the description, not in the video, but on my page. But anyway, you have other types of students, which could be like graphic design students, physical education students, engineering students. Oh yeah, and on the psychology law students, I would also like to add like military, oriented students and medical students, right? Yeah. On the other side, we would have what would be like graphic design students, physical education students, and maybe engineering students. And these type of students, um, paradoxically, they're actually more logical, but the logic they use isn't abstract, theoretical, mental energy or ideas, food for thought that you can chew on, like the other types of students. These type of students, the ones that I'm saying, like are engineering and physical education and graphic design, they're more interested in clarity. They're more interested in things that are very practical, right? And they are actually doers, right? They're doers in the sense that they need instructions. They need, like, their teacher should be like a coach, right? Someone that tells them what to do. They're social also. I mean, let's not get into like the whole introverted, extroverted realm here, but they're more prone to group activities, right? They think as a group, we could say, whereas the other ones think more as individuals. Um, they're more bodily, so they want to use their bodies, they want to move around, right? See, what happens to me is I think I'm more of a teacher that, okay, and let me just say this because I'm going to start talking about teachers now. So the ones on this side are called, in my perspective, maybe the term is wrong, intrapersonal. Intra from, going inside, right? Law students, medical students, psychology students, military oriented students, right? I'm more on this side too, intra, right? Where it's more reflection, it's more, thinking, complex abstract systems. And on this side, you have interpersonal students, interpersonal people, right? Where they want activities. For example, I get told this a lot. They want things that are dynamic. What they mean by dynamic is basically moving around. They want to move around. They want to talk to other people. They want to use their bodies. They get restless if they're just sitting there thinking, right? And a very big example now, there are teachers that are more intrapersonal and there are teachers that are more interpersonal. For example, for me, when I was in college, and how I like to be taught is like this, the teacher sitting at the front of the class talking to me, like teaching me, like making me think. And obviously, you would see where the problem with interpersonal students would be, where they're going to say, well, I want to move. I want things that are more dynamic, that are involve more movement, because I don't want to just sit here and listen to the teacher, right? Or I don't want to just sit here and think, like I want to do stuff. So I think that's huge because, as I state in the article, what's best, what's better in those cases? Is it better to align interpersonal or intrapersonal teachers with intrapersonal students and interpersonal teachers with interpersonal students, or vice versa, right? Because they're gonna have a hard time. Like, let's say I get a group of, and this is based on my experience. I get a group that's like physical education, and I'm trying to make them think. I'm trying to make them, understand things, and I'm explaining all these things, and they're just like, I just want to move. I just want to get out of here, right? I don't understand you. Like, stop trying to make me think. Like, what, right? And then, that type of teacher will try to adjust the class or whatever, but it just really, I mean, you can only do that for so long before you revert to yourself, right? To who you are. And the same situation with interpersonal teachers. If there's a teacher that comes in like, hey guys, we're going to get up, I remember I had teachers that would do that, that would tell us, okay, get up, stretch, we're going to go out here, we're going to, I'm thinking like walks in nature, moving around, stuff like that. Like it's like I don't want to do this. Like, just let me sit down. I know there are shy students maybe that are interpersonal that will say I don't want to get up, but they're just shy, but they really do like to get up, or they see like and see that's maybe an intrapersonal idea, but they see the purpose in it, they see the meaning in it, they understand why. I don't understand why. I don't care to move around. I rather, it's like you're a teacher, not a clown. Like, you're here to make me think, to put ideas in my head, to, like, teach me. Like, I don't want you to tell me like a coach, like go over there and now run over there and now jump. And, I don't see the purpose in that. So, it's complex. They're complex systems, both of them, because it's not like the people that are intra personal, or that rather be by themselves, or let's just say that I don't think they like being by themselves often, right? Like, they're social. I mean, you have elements of both in both, because you would say, well, one's more like emotional, maybe the people that are more like sports oriented, activity oriented, maybe they're more um, emotional because they like people, because they're more social. And it's like, no, you see, the people that are intra are also social and they're also emotional. It's just in different ways. Like, someone that's in the intra is more guarded of their ideals and their beliefs and what they think. And I think this is because they're not going to put themselves out there, so then their ideas will not only get judged, but will be altered by what other people think of their ideas, you see. Because and that's paradoxical, because they like to think, but they don't want to do that with their ideas. They want to do that with other ideas, right? So it's like, I have my ideas here, but it's like, now tell me your ideas and I'll listen. And they're also very good listeners. Whereas maybe interpersonal, they're listeners, but they want things. They don't want to think, right? They just want you to tell them what's what, and that's it, right? More pragmatic, but it's super complex. I think this is worth like investigating more. I mean, I've seen it, and this actually comes to me because I had a group, and I talk about that in the article. I had a group of like 15 students, last year, and now like all of them left except two, right? And I think, and I have had these like they've told me certain things, like they want to go into medicine, and they want to be doctors and things like that. So they have tolerance for, I guess you could say, like boring things, but not really boring, because they like to learn that way, so it's like a whole ordeal. But anyway, I thought I'd touch on those top topics too, just in this video, kind of these latest ideas. And I guess that's all for this video. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. All right, peace.